afternoon. What a fantastic venue. Only this weekend I was standing outside with a placard. So this is kind of a different audience, but hopefully you're just as angry. As Stephen said, my name's Bill, and I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission, which is really to look at how the world is changing. We have a couple of choices. We go through lots of decades of change when we change things. And one of the things we talked about, if you would have clocked back 5, 7, 8 years and you came to a conference, you would have heard something that people were saying, which is recruitment is marketing. Recruitment is marketing. And I kind of always challenged that and said, if recruiters are marketeers, who's doing the recruiting? Who's doing the hiring? And this is the thing I want to challenge, because what I think happened with the whole digital age, the whole period of digital transformation, what happened is in our desperate effort to become digital marketeers and excellent, we achieved one thing. And that one thing we achieved was, as our organizations, we turned them into magnificent shit magnets. We became spectacular at attracting people who we were never going to hire. And we've continued this trend, because this is what happened. I started out in recruiting, Stephen said, 35 years ago. Started at 16, walked into an agency, got a job there, did that for a period of time. 35 years later, still working with technology companies, hiring organizations on technology and strategy and so on, keep moving so no one finds me out, that kind of stuff. And the thing that I've noticed really easily is how little actually things have changed. The technology has changed, the devices have changed, what people want has changed. But as recruiters, we haven't changed at all, because we move in talent acquisition like super tankers. When we talk about agile, people are agile. You wake up in the morning and say, right, I used to use Facebook, now I'm going to use Nimble, or I'm going to use whatever it is because I'm worried about my data. Now I'm concerned about data protection. We could change our mind in a very agile way, but as organizations, we need levels of permission and budget and everything else to do everything, which means change normally takes 3 to 5 years just to even start thinking about it. So organizations always run behind people. Now, who here, so I get an idea of who I'm speaking to, who here remembers having a fax machine in the office? Yeah, remember having a fax machine in the office? Good old days of work when bullying was compulsory? When you actually wrote to Jimmy Savile in order to meet Rolf Harris, and that was a good thing. Remember those? Smoking in the office, remember those good old days, right? And I'm glad that you remember a fax machine, because that means you're digital immigrants. You are digital immigrants. The slide I've got behind me is a picture from a great London artist, London Subdued. Recommend you check him out. I had a debate about whether to use this one or his other slide, which is a big picture of a computer which says, I'm coming to steal your jobs so you can blame the immigrants. And that, for me, really sums up what we've done with technology. Kevin talked this morning, and I was trying to be polite as it's Stephen's event. Kevin talks about the highest levels of employment. Never had more people in work, never had more people in jobs. But what's really happened with technology, what's really happened with digital transformation, is we've used it for the companies against the people, in order to change the way that people work. And we've really done that in hiring. We've made it harder and harder to get hired in the right job. We've built our technology to do that. When I started out, if I wanted your data, if I wanted your information, you had to come and see me, and you had to give me a piece of paper, right? You came in, when I first started out, you'd have to come in with a pen, old technology, and fill in a form, because nobody had a typewriter at home. They were kind of expensive. So you'd come in and fill in a form and you'd give me that piece of paper. Over time, we started getting word processors and stuff like that. And people could begin to have CVs. That's when we began saying, right, instead of coming to talk to us and giving us information, you've got to give us a CV. That's what we want in order to filter people. And then we got job boards. And we started getting things like Broadbean that said, not only are we going to use one job board, there are other brands available, by the way, but not only are we going to use one job board, now we can use lots of them, and some of them are free, and you can get more and more people applying. And suddenly we went, we can't actually deal with this. Suddenly everyone's got a computer at home and they can email us and stuff. How are we going to deal with this? How I dealt with paper was, if you brought a form and you filled it in, or a CV into my office, I put it in a filing cabinet. And I kept it in that filing cabinet for 7 years. And I know I kept that for 7 years, not because I ever looked at it again, but the law said I had to keep it for 7 years. So that's what I did. And when my filing cabinet was full, I bought another filing cabinet. I can remember one office in Fish Street Hill where we had to reinforce the floor because we had so many filing cabinets of CVs. And then someone gave us this opportunity by developing things like servers and ultimate storage that said, instead of having 1,000 CVs, let's have 1,000,000. Let's keep everyone's detail and never look at it again. Let's build our recruiting system for information storage and not information retrieval. Let's not use the data we've got. And that's really how we ended up building our businesses. So not that much has changed from paper to digital. And yet we now face an age where we're talking about data. Data is everywhere. We're talking about all the data that we hold and all the information that we have and all the devices that we have and the speed at which we can access it. How are we going to use it? I talk, really everything we've done in technology, what have we done is we've built recruiting processes which are basically games of thrones. In our organizations, getting a job is not about finding the best person. It's about hiring the last person alive at the end of our arduous process. Making people fiery and jump through hoops and do loads of things which are really not relevant to getting hired. So we have all this opportunity and all this data and all this information, and yet we're not providing a collection point. And now we're at a point where we're saying we're entering a new age, and we're talking about big data, and we're talking about AI, artificial intelligence. Question for most talent acquisition teams is, do we have any intelligence? Before we even start talking about the artificial kind. And I look at it and say, right, what does this mean? Organizations that I go into, something I'll share with you, and you can think about it I challenge you to think about it for your own organizations. Wherever I go, even some of the best management consultants and banks in the world that I've worked with, I've never been to an organization where people know how people are hired. They kind of think the talent acquisition team is like a team of Harry Potters. And that they come along and say, 2,000 people, and we go, hire Armus, and they show up next Monday, right? That's kind of what they think happens, that there's nothing behind this. They will understand the headlines. When you go in and you talk to a board or whoever you're talking to, they will understand the headlines. They will understand, yeah, there's 3 interviews and we do a background check. We have a psychometric test, and we're really cool now, so we have a game, which looks like a pre-Star Wars game, but looks like pre-Space Invaders, kind of. All the psychometric games are designed to look really old, designed by old people for kids. I always think that's kind of interesting when I look at the people who are the vendors, right? So you start thinking about it and saying, what is this? And what is it we're trying to do? What is it we're trying to achieve? And then we start looking at what we're going to do with algorithms and what will happen, right? Because we're all talking about AI. Going to start off with a headline of a statement, which is really important. There is no AI in recruiting or HR technology at this current moment in time. Stephen said, I go to probably 7 major HR tech events in China, in India. I'm off to New Zealand, Australia next week to speak at a couple of HR tech events. I see a lot of technology. I look at roughly 400 startups a month as part of the review and with VCs that I work with. I have seen nothing which I would consider to be artificial intelligence, apart from what vendors are selling me. So there is no AI at this moment in time. There is no free thinking systems which has independent thought, the Turing test. There's nothing building its own algorithms. But what we have is some fantastic technology and a fantastic opportunity if we embrace it for what it is. The technology that we have now is fantastic at machine learning and recommendation, processing large volumes of data and coming back with an informed decision or action based on those data points or those behaviors or whatever it is, machine learning. So if we say, let's forget about AI for now, it will come. AI will come. It will come in the next 2, 3, 4 years. We're beginning to see examples, maybe with IBM Watson, some major technology, we're starting to see things which might get close to being considered AI. But if it's coming, there's certain things we have to do to get it right. Otherwise, we will make a colossal fuck up. And this is what I'm saying to you. If we don't get this piece right, we don't think about it correctly, when you go back to your organization and you think about it, we will make massive mistakes. We will take all the mistakes we make as humans, from being unconscious bias to being biased in our selection process, to poor hiring practices, and we will automate them and put them on steroids, and we will be able to blame the machine. Because it's not my decision. It's the shortlist that came out of the machine. It wasn't me. This is what the machine said. So we have to understand what we're dealing with. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not out there. I'm not a Luddite. I work with technology every day. So I'm not out there. I'm not saying let's smash up the spinning wheels, stop the printing presses, or any of that stuff. That's not what I'm doing. I'm urging people to think about where we're going and what we need to do to make it better. I'm going to give you a simple example. I was involved with some matching technology with a company in Bulgaria who built matching technology, basically, and the way in which companies bought matching technology, lots of people are looking at it, got to deal with the volume, how can I get to a shortlist? The way in which people buy matching technology is to do this. They'll take 1,000 CVs and 100 jobs, requisitions, whatever you want to call them, depending on what country you're in, and give them to give that technology to their top SWAT ace team of recruiters and say, produce a shortlist. And they will take that shortlist and say, right, this is the shortlist. This is the people my best people would have chosen from the 1,000 people who are available for this particular role. And then they put the same data through the machine. They put it through the algorithm, and if the shortlist which is produced by the machine looks exactly the same or similar, usually it's about 70%. If it's about 70% matching the shortlist from the people, they consider that to be a good and valid technology in which they want to make an investment. And if the technology comes back and says, here is something new, here's different people you hadn't considered, based on all the data that was available, it is considered not something people would want to buy, because it doesn't match what people do. So what are we trying to do with technology? And this is a real story. One of the organizations I'm working with, I'm looking at recruiting process and saying, okay, nobody understands how people are hired, so let's go trace it. So what I do when I go into an organization is I follow the paper. If you applied today, where would it go and what would happen? The average number of tasks to get someone hired by an organization is between 57 and 75. Between 57 and 75 things have to happen in order for someone to get hired by an organization. And in a larger organization, that can involve up to 30 to 40 people. A task can be as simple as booking an interview room, sending an email to someone, scheduling a hiring manager, sending a hiring manager a CV. These are all tasks that need to happen in order. Each task has a task owner and a bit of budget for it, right? That's how hiring happens, if all these things happen. Now, with all these people and all these tasks, pretty easy to see how we get log jams and blockages which we can't see. Pretty easy to see how we go, we've got a problem with our time to hire. We've got a problem with hiring people, and go, yeah, but I can't see where it is because we seem to be putting enough people in the top end. But once you get that data, you start getting the numbers. The particular organisation I'm thinking of now, very big management consultants, charge thousands of pounds a day to tell other people how to run their business. I tried to charge them the same rate. That was kind of interesting. And when you went in and have that conversation and you have a look and say, right, how are people hired and what's the process, and nobody knows. Once you follow it, the other interesting thing was in order to get all the data to see everything that was going on, I had to manually go into 5 different pieces of technology and extract it. It took me about 4 weeks to work out their hire flow, to put it in order and then start looking at the numbers and where we had a blockage. The reason they couldn't hire enough graduates, by the way, this is kind of interesting. Once you got all the data out, the reason they couldn't hire enough graduates is they didn't have enough interview rooms. It was a dead simple fix to a global problem, right? Because they interview all of their graduates in the head office because you want to show people somewhere where they're not going to be working in order to impress them and give them a great surprise on day one. By the way, our Manchester office is a bit different to our Docklands one, by the way. And the view's not quite as good, right? And to give them a surprise, and then you have an order of hiring. So there's lots and lots of interview rooms in this particular building, but they're organised by senior partners, revenue earners, experienced hires. Bottom of the list is the graduate hiring team. It's the hardest people to get rooms. And then once you look at the simple ratio and numbers, and running recruitment is no different to how it used to be: activity, efficiency, return. How much work do we have to do? What result do we need from that work in order to hire the people we need? That's really the three metric that I look at. That's how I run hiring teams all the time. That's what I look at: activity, efficiency, result. And that's been the same from the days when I used to have to draw 5-bar gates and use an abacus to work out what the ratio was, right? That's not, recruiting hasn't changed that much in that respect. But you could look at that ratio and say, this is where we have a problem. This is what, in order to interview this number of people, we need this number of interview rooms and we need to work the process like this. So when you look at it, then the next conversation is, I can automate 80% of this. Forget about AI. I can automate 80% of the tasks and make it self-service for all of the users, all of the key users. Do it very easily. From sourcing, identification of people, message and outreach, apply, chatbots to deal with people, top end of the funnel. Chatbots, absolutely critical. You go back and have a look at that. The results coming back from chatbots is everybody, all of the feedback from candidates are actually saying, I would rather talk to a bot than a person at the top of the funnel. That's what I want to do. This is how I deal with volume. I want to look at jobs, I want to look at opportunities, but I want to get to answers quickly. And I don't want someone who's trying to persuade me to do something I don't want to do. I just want straightforward answer. Number one question chatbots get asked when we put them on the front end of a career site. Number one question, which job pays the most money? Because that's what's kind of interesting. Which job pays the most money and where's it going? So putting chatbots on the front end, all this kind of stuff means when do we involve the recruiters? So do we say, right, algorithm's going to get you? So the answer I got then is, right, we've got 100 recruiters. So if you can automate 80% of the work, we can get a fantastic ROI on that because we can sack 80 of the recruiters. And within a year, we would have paid for the technology and it's all going to even out. And we're going to have all this sexy kit doing great stuff, making us look like the modern organization we pretend we are in our employer brand, right? So that's with all the innovation and good teamwork. And so when we start thinking about that and saying, right, what does that mean? What that means is we use technology to get exactly the same result. We use the benefit of technology to increase the volume we can deal with, the speed at which we can process things, but we do not make things better if we base it on the past. If our definition of good, a good outcome, an algorithm requires two things: lots of data and historical outcomes. Because what you're working back from is the historical outcome to say, what instructions should we give? And I work with very clever people who build this stuff. What instructions should we give it and how do we get it right? And if we base it on old definitions of a good outcome, how can we reduce the cost? How can we hire quicker? Rather than how can we hire better, or even what is better? What is better? One of the big mistakes organizations are making right now is using retention as a measure of quality of hire. Retention of measure is a measure of one thing in your organization: how bad you are at getting rid of poor performers. Generally speaking, what is important is retention of relationship. Who knows us? What are we doing with our alumni? People talked to me the other day and said, and I answered a question very honestly in one of the technology forums that said, and people thought my answer was kind of strange. They quite often think my answer is quite strange. But the question they asked was, do we think all of this new technology, accessibility, ease of employment, great candidate experience that will come with technology will mean people will change jobs more often? And my answer to that was no. And my answer for the reason of no was quite simple. I don't think we're going to have jobs anymore. I think we're going to have work. That's going to become our challenge over time. So we've got to think about how we use technology to connect people with work rather than people with jobs, which requires a bit of a different mindset. That also means when we build our algorithms, the outcomes of what is good is going to be different to the things which were good in the past. It's a blank sheet of paper. And that's why I say I'm on a mission and on a challenge, is to get you to rethink what outcome are you trying to achieve? What are we trying to get to? What are we trying to end up? And people will say to me, well, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to decide who the best hires are. We're going to look at the top 10% of high performers in our organisation. And everything we're going to build in assessment, in games, in all this kind of cool stuff we're going to put in the front end, and the algorithms that are going to suggest people, even the way in which we target people for messaging and technology. Because ultimately, when we're going really quickly, is people won't look for jobs, jobs will look for people. And then work will look for people in a very targeted way, because all the data is suddenly available, right? That needs a little bit of thinking about. If that's the new world, what do we need to look like? How do we get this bit right? And the way in which we get this bit right is dependent on three things happening in your organisation. And whatever scale you work out, these are the things you need to think about. Number one, you need a lot of data. A lot of data. You need a big history of stuff. And you need to think of it as data. You need to think, where do we start? Great place to start. If you want to understand your marketplace, your marketing, your trends, everything else, is to go to your ATS or your CRM and take all the CVs that you have, all the people who've ever applied to you. Quite a few organisations I look at, that's 1 million plus people. And then don't think of them as CVs. Don't think of them a CV as a transactional document. When we last did this experiment, we figured out that a CV we could answer 227 questions that were useful from a CV, and we stopped asking questions because we were bored, not because we had a finite list. What are the things we can find out? If I put all the CVs together, I can find out trends, how long people stay at jobs, where they came from, what organisations they come and work for us from, they apply from us, why they come if I've got interview notes. What do people do? I can base things on people, not just on my high performers. Because if I base everything on my high performers, I'm narrowing the funnel and becoming more biased in what I do and using a machine to justify that. We have to look at how diverse our data is that we're using, our core set. Because if our data has been acquired, if our high performers have been acquired from a certain type of person, from a certain university, certain race, whatever, certain ethnic mix, whatever it is, I broke the carpet. I always break something. I can almost guarantee that the results we get will be biased. Even Cambridge Analytica, that I speak about quite a lot, for predicting outcomes for messaging in the last American election, was 70% accurate for women, 30% accurate for men. Why? Because 70% of the people who provided the data and filled in the original questionnaire, which came from Dr. Kogan and Cambridge University, were women at home with children. So it created a biased data set. So you've got to look at your data and say, is our data clean? Is it biased? Do we need to make sure we have a diverse data set? And have we decided what a good outcome is? Have we decided what questions we want answering before we go look at that data? Is everybody represented in this data set? Not just the hypos, the old boys club who get promoted every year. Not those people. Are we being diverse in what we're doing? And then do we understand the data in order to challenge it? Because the more that we use technology to collect data, the less we understand the process by which that decision was acquired. And the less we understand the decision, the more we have to accept what the machines are telling. So look at education. How do we teach people the underlying principles? Give people data driving licenses. Get the data clean. get it broad, and understand you are in the age of machine learning, not AI. What does that mean? When a machine learns, you have to allow it time to learn. Our expectation of taking a machine out of a box, plugging it into our process and thinking it is going to give us the right decision on day one, or challenging when we're buying, is kind of like sending someone to school for the first day and asking them to take a degree when no learning has taken place. We have to allow technology to learn, and we have to figure out how we use all of our technology in everything that we do for the benefit of all the people and not just 1% of them. Thank you.